I want to thank you for taking the time to watch today's presentation. Eastland is publishing this and other presentations as we transition over the next 3 years to standards-based learning. We look forward to your questions and feedback as we work our way through the transition process. This first installment will provide background on standards for learning, tell you a little bit about how we are aligning our assessments to those standards, and share with you some research on standards-based learning. Before we begin, we should start with a clear understanding of what standards are and why they matter. Standards clearly state what students will be expected to know and do as a result of the instruction they receive in a given course. You might think of standards as expectations, only more specific and clear. For example, a teacher might expect his or her students to be on time for class. This is a common expectation in schools. But if a teacher was going to state that as a standard, he might say, students will be in their seats when the bell rings, with their materials and assignments ready for learning. Because a standard is so strictly defined, its mastery can be measured. Students and educators and parents can be held accountable for meeting the standard, or for not meeting the standard and having to try again. But the idea is that by writing a specific standard, any ambiguity is removed. The Common Core state standards have been around long enough now to enjoy both praise and criticism. Usually the criticism comes from those who feel that the standards have been imposed upon us. That's not entirely accurate. In truth, the Common Core standards were a state-led initiative in which the governors of many of the states of the Union together identified the skills and knowledge that students would need to take their place in the workforce or to go on to college after graduation from high school. They were designed to establish clear and rigorous standards for those skills. They were limited to the areas of reading, language arts, writing, and mathematics. But it's important to know that they were informed and developed by content experts and teachers and researchers and other people. They were even benchmarked to international standards. And throughout the process, the public was invited to provide feedback. If you'd like a very quick summary of the Common Core state standards, watch this 3-minute video. You might say to yourself, well, haven't we always had standards? Why do we need new standards? And the answer is yes, we've always had standards, but the Common Core standards are different in many ways. But maybe the best way to summarize that difference is to say that the Common Core standards focus more on how students apply and use knowledge to complete tasks of increasing complexity. In other words, how they handle more difficult problems or situations using the skills and knowledge that they have gained. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the shifts inherent in the Common Core standards, click on the links below. Let's look at an example of a Common Core state standard for reading. Below is one of the 10 Common Core standards for reading for information. This example is from the 5th grade level. The student will cite textual evidence to support analysis of what an informational text says explicitly, as well as inferences that the reader can draw from the text. As a Common Core standard, the expectation is that by the end of 5th grade, a student should be able to read an informational text that he or she has not read before, answer questions about it, analyze and articulate its main point, and draw conclusions that go beyond what the text says literally. The expectation is that any 5th grade student, by the end of the year, should be able to do this with any informational text written at the 5th grade level. As I said before, the Common Core state standards were limited in their focus to the subjects of reading and language arts, writing, and math. But Eastland is seeking to align all of our courses to standards. And we're doing this for 2 reasons. First of all, We really do believe that all instruction is better when learning standards are identified and pursued by the teacher, by the student, by the parents, by the district. Secondly, we really feel that all coursework should be designed to align the content and the instruction to standards. Standards that say clearly what students are expected to know and do as a result of the course that they are taking. Think of it as a quality assurance mechanism. If you're going to do something, you should know what is expected of you at the end of that process. Let's look at an example of a standard in a non-core subject area. Below is one of the 12 national core standards for fine arts. This particular example is from the high school standards. The student will analyze and evaluate the reasons and ways that an exhibition is presented. The expectation is clear that high school art students will, by the end of a course, be able to analyze the various elements of a given exhibition of art, make value judgments based on established criteria, compare and contrast different displays of the same artwork, distinguish between quality levels, and recommend changes that would improve a given display of art. So the whole idea is to begin with the end in mind. The idea with standards-based learning is to design an assessment that will really measure whether students have mastered the standards for the end of the course, and then to empower the teacher to design curriculum and instruction that will prepare students to demonstrate mastery of those standards. We refer to this as backward design. We identify the expectations for the end of the year. We design assessments to measure how students are doing. We administer those assessments twice a year. And then the teacher is empowered to design curriculum and to provide instruction that will help the students meet those standards. During the first half of the 2016-17 school year, Eastland administrators and staff have been working on the first step of this backward design process to write assessments that really measure how students are doing. Those assessments have been aligned with grade level standards, and they seek to assess all grade level standards for all the main subjects. The tests are written so that the students are presented with questions written at 3 levels: a basic level, an applied level, and an evaluative level. The idea here is to see just how well a student has mastered a standard. If a text has to be read, care was taken to make sure that the text is leveled properly. The tests are also designed to be administered and graded efficiently, without taking too much time. And they are written so that students are required to read, think, write, and solve problems that they have not seen before. They may have practiced with similar problems, but the point of the assessment is to see how they do with things that they have not seen before. Let's look at an example of how we can assess whether a student has mastered a grade level standard. One of the reading literature standards for 5th grade is that the student will determine the theme of a story, drama, or poem from details in the text. To assess this standard, we selected the poem Casey at the Bat. We verify that the poem is written at the 5th grade level, not too high and not too low. We generated 3 questions, a basic question worth 1 point, an application question worth 2 points, and a 4-point short answer that requires students to evaluate and explain their thinking. 5th grade students would then be required to read the text and answer the questions. The teacher would score the students' responses to the questions to determine at what level the student has mastered the standard. To read a summary of the research in support of standards-based learning and standards-based grading, including a bibliography of all the sources identified, click on the link below. In summary, Eastland's transition to standards-based learning has begun. The work is time-consuming and it's challenging, but we ask everyone to keep in mind that standards-based learning is a quality assurance initiative, supported by research on the best educational practices and pursued in good faith, that honesty about each student's actual progress toward grade level standards will yield improved outcomes. 2016-17 is a trial year and a first step in our transition to standards-based learning. Thank you.